Welcome to another episode of Peak Potential Success Show. My name is Fong. I'm an entrepreneur, business strategist, real estate investor, speaker, and also a best-selling author. And every single day, I have the opportunity to help others unlock the potentials and guide them to succeed. Today, I have an amazing guest. This is somebody I actually know for a long, long time. He was the keynote speaker at an event that I was attending. And ever since then, I had him on my mind for the longest time. And I'm very happy to have him here today. He is a serial entrepreneur, a business columnist, a speaker, a leadership development facilitator, an author, a real estate investor, and also a longtime podcaster. Please welcome the man who will demystify technology for you, the gadget guy, Mr. Greg Gazin.
Thanks, Fong. What a build-up.
No, thank you for being here.
I don't know how you can operate with such energy at this early in the morning on a Sunday.
I find my energy everywhere I go. So
thanks for having me.
It's also easy when I have a great guest with me. So thank you very much for your time here.
You're welcome.
And also, I know that you did this on purpose for me. So thank you very much for wearing that Batman hoodie. For those people who don't know, I'm a huge Batman fan. So thank you very much for that.
Here. Hi, I'm Batman.
Yeah, I believe I asked you the question before. I never see Batman and Greg in the same room, so I guess you are Batman, right?
It's all about the gadgets and the toys, of course, but just for you, Fong, just for you.
Thank you very much for that. So for people who don't really know who you are, tell us more about what you do and how'd you get to where you are today?
Sorry, the light's here. Well, as you mentioned in my bio, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been self-employed for over 3 decades. I get involved in a number of projects. I started years ago back in IT, and then after going to a conference, which we can talk about a little bit later, I was inspired to become an entrepreneur and work for myself, and I really haven't looked back since then. I had a computer shop, computer operation, also worked with CDs and DVDs. And then I decided that, you know what, it's time to get out there and do a lot more writing and a lot more speaking. And that's what I've been doing for a number of years. So typically on a typical day, I'm writing articles, reviewing gadgets. I'm doing a lot of podcasting. I'm helping people find their voice. I'm helping products find their voice in terms of being able to talk a lot about them and review them. In fact, right now, I'm playing with a little gadget called the Airwave Things, or Things by Airwave, or it's the Wave by Air Things, pardon me. And it's a radon detector. Many people may not know that you may have radon in your house, and radon is not good for your health. But anyway, this isn't really really a commercial. I'm also working on a couple of more books and looking also at extending the podcasting that I'm doing. So it's, in a nutshell, I do a number of things. A lot of it's project related. I'm primarily a freelancer.
Awesome. You mentioned you're an author in the book that you talk about. Tell us more about that book.
Well, just in case you're wondering, it's right here. There you go, my little book. It's called Corey Outsmarts the Butterflies, and it's about a little boy who is afraid to do his show and tell. There's an older boy that guides him through it, and it's primarily a book to help people build their communication skills, leadership skills, and build their confidence. It was originally designed to be a children's book or a young reader's book, 6 to 12, but I discovered that I probably have more people buying it for themselves who are afraid to speak in public or have some challenges. I wrote it, interestingly enough, I wrote it originally because a friend of mine had a book, and I was trying to convince him. I said, Kevin, I said, write a prequel to your current book. Okay, here's the storyline, here's the characters, because the material is based on material that I was using at Northern Alberta Institute of Technology to teach the entrepreneur students on how to give presentations, which I would do twice a year. And he said, Greg, since you have such a great idea, why don't you just go and do it yourself? But more recently, I've discovered that it's so important for our youth to have a voice. If you think of what's going on around the world, there's a lot of movements that are happening. We find quite often that some of the youth seem to find themselves hidden behind the keyboard all the time. And if I can find a way to help a young reader or a young individual, help them find their voice so that they can make a difference in the world, because they are our future leaders, then it was all worthwhile.
Now, like many authors like myself, after you finish writing one book, you usually have an itch to finish 2, 3, 4, 5 books and stuff. I know you're on your way of doing another few books here. Can you tell us more about what's coming up?
Oh, I don't want to give away the secret too much, but I give you a little bit. I'll just give you a little bit of an insight. One of the books, I had this interesting opportunity of managing a Beatles tribute band many years ago, and there's a long story as to what happened there. But to make a long story short, I learned a lot. I made a lot of mistakes, but I also had quite a bit of success, and I was able to take what I did in the past, in working in a computer company or creating a computer company and having a retail operation and a consulting operation. And I was able to apply a lot of the things that I learned there in the business. And so the book is going to be revolving around, let's say, leadership lessons I learned from, let's just call it the fake Beatles, for lack of a better term. And it's interesting because I didn't realize a lot of those things then. I realized it after the fact. So looking back, I thought there's some really interesting leadership lessons, and something like the topic of the Beatles is actually very appealing to a lot of other people. I'm also working on a few other things, which it's probably a little bit too soon to talk about.
Awesome. Well, I also know that you've been a podcaster for a very, very long time. And in fact, like right now, a lot of people have podcasts. I'm a pure rookie compared to you. You were doing podcasting when people go, "What is podcasting?" So tell us more about your podcast and why people gravitated to so much.
Well, I love podcasting. Having been a gadget guy I've been podcasting now for 15 years, and having been a gadget guy, I always had this sort of urge to do some kind of a podcast. And at that time, podcasting was in its infancy stage. I didn't necessarily want to do a podcasting about gadgets. So I was a member of Toastmasters, and in Toastmasters, you have an opportunity of creating what's called a high performance leadership project. So I took on the project of creating a podcast. And again, the fact that it was in its infancy stage, my first podcast was actually a phone recording where I took one of those little gadget devices and I put the suction cup on the back of the receiver of the phone, and I actually recorded there.
Oh, wow.
I just felt that having written over 4,000 articles and having been a journalist for a number of years as well, I found that it was an opportunity to take the written word and create a voice from it, or just being able to deliver that in a voice way. Now podcasts, I mean, if you look at Apple iTunes, a directory, or I guess it's called Apple Podcasts now, there's over 1.5 million podcasts that are available. So it first started as me getting excited and interested in creating a podcast. And my first podcast was interviewing the district governor for our district at the time. But as time evolved, what I discovered with podcasting, it was a lot more about getting people to share their stories. So interviewing people, getting them to share their stories with the world, just like you're doing with me right now. And that was quite novel back then. Now it's becoming a lot more commonplace. So I get pretty excited doing that. So my main podcast is called Toastcaster, the Communication, Leadership, and Learning Lab. Again, it started originally as a Toastmasters podcast, but really it's designed for anyone who wants to improve their communication skills and leadership skills, or want to be a better communicator or leader. So of course, I also managed to throw a bunch of gadgets in there as well. I'm also one of the 2 co-hosts and the producer for the Toastmasters International podcast globally. And that I find really, really exciting, because we get to interview people that have been featured in the Toastmaster magazine.
Wow, very, very creative. And I'm sure at the time people were like, what is a podcast? And what are you doing? Why are you doing a show?
Yeah, what is a podcast, and how do I access this podcast? I mean, there's still a few people that are wondering what a podcast is, but I think for the most part, most people know I think what the podcast is. And of course, everyone is getting into it. I mean, even the TV stations and the radio stations and the celebrities. In fact, coming up, I have a really exciting interview that I'll be doing later this week. It's with a fellow named Dave Bio-Baranek. And he was one of the he's a Top Gun, he was a former Top Gun instructor. So he was there working with Tom Cruise on the movie Top Gun way back when. So I'm going to be interviewing this week because he's got a brand new book out. It's his 3rd book, and it's actually pretty exciting. So I get to interview some incredible people. And I still, just as you're asking me this question, I'm thinking back to a previous podcast. I mean, I've done over 250 podcasts. I've probably done about 1,000 interviews if I include the the interviews for people that I wrote the articles about for their gadgets and technology and the businesses. But I'm thinking as we're speaking, I interviewed a lady named Sarah Safari, and she was climbing Mount Everest, and she was on Everest. I think it was in 2014 or 2015 when the earthquake hit. And so she recounted her story about hanging off of Everest. And every time I think of it, it just sends shivers up my spine. It gets my little bat tails going up. So I love podcasting. And one of the big things I like about podcasting, don't get me wrong, videos are great. You and I are doing a video right now. But I find with podcasts is that they're so portable. You can listen to them anywhere. I walk every single day, and I listen to a lot of podcasts. I also find that they're a lot easier to edit, and they're really non-intrusive, so that you could actually be listening to podcasts when, for example, when you maybe you're supposed to be working. You can listen to podcasts. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Anyways,
Oh,
this
Batman.
is for you, and this is also for you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
You mentioned about a conference a while ago, and I know that at that conference you met somebody very, very important. Tell us more about that story and how that actually changed your life.
Yeah, actually, I still have the mug here. I'm also not only a gadget guy, I'm also a pack rat. Sadly, to my to my wife's dismay, I like to collect things. A number of years ago, I went to the university and I had an opportunity of going to a convention or a conference. And as it shows on the mug here, it's a joint conference, but it's called the YEO ACE, the Association of Collegiate Entrepreneurs and the Association of Collegiate Entrepreneurs and the Young Entrepreneurs Organization. I was one of the founding members of the Young Executives Club at the University of Alberta, now called the Young Entrepreneurs Club. So we attended this conference, and I had my first opportunity to meet the legendary and sadly now passed away Steve Jobs. And it was a phenomenal experience. In fact, I had a little close encounter with him. Again, I've always been a walker. Was walking around the hotel. It was early in the morning, and I saw him sitting there by himself because typically he was popular with everybody. Everybody was swarming around him. And I had an opportunity, and I saw him, and I went up to him and I said, hi. I said, can I talk to you for a second? And I don't know how I had the courage because I was so nervous. And we sat down and we chatted for a moment or two. And it was very enlightening. He was also the keynote speaker. He was being awarded the #1 entrepreneur of that year. He had earned more than all of the other 99 together. And when I met him, it was not only was I a Big Apple fan, but I was very inspired by his speech. And one of the things that he said, and it might be one of his lesser known quotes, I should say. And he said, use your mind and follow your heart. And that's something that really stuck with me. So when I went back, I was working and going to school at the same time. When I went back, I was so motivated that I wanted to start my own business. And he really motivated me to become an entrepreneur. Interestingly enough, I got into the computer business. We did eventually get Apple authorized. And in a whole irony, over the years, as I was writing a lot of articles for a number of outlets, I had a opportunity of attending some of the Macworld Expos and some of the, what do you call them? I lost my train of thought here. The developer events. And it was in 2010, about 6 or 7 months before he passed away, they were unveiling some of the new iPods. I got to attend the event. And then at the end of the event, what happens is that all the media go to this little room in the back, or it could be a big room in the back, and we get to play with some of the new stuff sometimes before it comes out. Now, Steve, of course, his health was already failing at that time. And he was walking with an entourage. And so I went up to him and I said, Steve, I just want to tell you something. And people were saying, no, he's busy. And so Steve stopped and said, well, what is it? I said, I just wanted to thank you. I said, 25 years ago, I met you at a conference. So he said, which conference? And what happened? I didn't have my little mug with me. I totally blanked on the conference, but then eventually I did remember. And I just wanted to let him know that he had that significant impact on my life, not only to help me become a better entrepreneur, but in time, he also helped me become a better speaker because I was fearful. I was afraid, and I walked away from some lucrative business opportunities because I didn't have the courage to present. In fact, I would never have been able to talk to you right now. And then as he was walking away, I finally got to say what I was saying very quickly. And as he was walking away, he mouthed what I interpreted as, "I'm glad." So it came full circle after 25 years. And it's funny because, he's always quoted in different things and people are always bringing him up as an example. But here's an example of someone that had a significant impact on my life. And yet he didn't know me from anything.
Mhm.
So, I mean, the takeaway for that is that sometimes you can find people that can impact you in your life. And I've had people locally that have made an impact on my life. There can be things that can impact you on your life, like me joining Toastmasters and being able to converse and present myself and give keynote speeches. And then you have someone like Steve Jobs, who the things that he's done for the world, that big dent that he's made in the world, unbeknownst to him, he would make a significant impact on me.
Wow.
So yeah, that's my story. And if you go on my Twitter profile, it's Gadget Greg, at Gadget Greg. You'll see there's a picture of Steve and I, and you'll be very, very surprised that he's actually wearing a tie, because most of us know him as wearing the turtleneck.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I did a presentation for the Junior Achievement a couple of years back for the presidents, the Junior Achievement of Alberta. And I was sharing a similar story, and I showed a picture of Steve Jobs I showed a picture of me with Steve Jobs, and I said, "Does anyone know who this person is?" And of course, no one in the room had any idea who it was because they didn't recognize him. But I kind of figured that. So what I did is the next picture I had was, of course, him with his turtleneck and his round glasses, his John Lennon glasses. So I thought that was actually kind of fun. But yeah, it just goes to show you how people can have a significant impact on you. And so as entrepreneurs, it's important, if you think that you could have an impact on someone, you got to be careful because everyone's watching you.
And you never know who is actually watching you. So
Yeah, that's true. Well,
always have that best foot forward kind of thing.
Yeah, and also hide your webcam because you just never know who's spying on you.
You mentioned gadgets a few times, and you are known as the gadget guy. Is there a lot of pressure being known as the gadget guy? Like, first of all, how did you get that name or get that nickname? And second of all, because technology advances so fast, is there a lot of pressure going, you know what, I need to keep up, I have to keep up, I have to keep up, I have to keep up?
Well, first of all, I'm going to let you know that anyone who is a Gen Z or a Gen Z, that means someone who's born after 1995, probably knows a lot more about gadgets than I do. I just don't have the energy to keep up anymore like I used to. So how I became the gadget guy is actually kind of funny. I got interested in fixing things and learning about things when I was younger. I had a neighbor that had a TV and the speaker wasn't working. And I thought to myself, I said, maybe I can help fix that. So my dad came along with me to make sure that I didn't electrocute myself. And it turned out that it was just a loose wire in the back of the speaker. So that was something that really got me into fixing and gadgets. It was probably Star Trek, that communicator. Everyone took their what do you call it? Stapler. I think I've got one here somewhere. And they would open up the stapler and they would go, Kirk Enterprise, Kirk Enterprise. But what had happened was I'm a freelance writer and I was writing for a number of publications. I've written quite often for many, many years. I wrote for the Edmonton Sun. I wrote for Canoe. I was also writing for a publication called Biz Edmonton. And I was sharing a new gadget with my publisher, my editor. And he said, Greg, what are you going to write about this month? So I said, okay, this is what I'm going to write about. And then when we were done, he said, Greg, you're such a gadget guy. And I thought, oh, I like that. Then it sort of stuck. What was the second half of the question? You see, I'm already getting forgetful here.
I was asking, what is different? Is there a lot of pressure trying to keep up with that moniker?
You know what? There is a lot of pressure in the sense that things are changing daily. And what's happening is that in some areas, there's a lot of new technology that's coming out. Just look at let's look at something like Zoom that, 10 years ago, it was, video conferencing was in its infancy stage, where all the new things that are coming out with wireless and built-in sensors and things like that. But when it comes to things like phones, what we're seeing now is that the changes the incremental changes are not as significant as they were, right? When I first started, in fact, I have one right here. This is the iPhone 1. This is the first iPhone that came out in 2007. In fact, I had to buy it in the US because it wasn't even available in Canada. In fact, the first iPhone never came out in Canada. The changes are small and they're more incremental. So all of a sudden it's not as exciting as before. And also, as I mentioned before, the speed at which rate is changing to try to be able to keep up on top of everything that's out there is virtually impossible. Plus just the sheer numbers. I mean, look how many companies are making computer cases. Look how many companies are making webcams. Look how many companies are making microphones. So what I decided that I decided that I have to sort of pick and choose in terms of what I'm going to look at, what I'm going to play with, what I'm going to review. Because when I'm reviewing, I can talk about a product and I can review a product. If I'm talking about it, I can just find out about it. I can do my research. I can look at the specs. But if I'm reviewing it, I want to sit down and play with it. The other side, which is more to the business side of things, or more from maybe if you want to call it the branding side, is a sense that when you have a moniker, you're sometimes stuck with it. So what happens is that I do a lot of business related. I do a lot of business writing, and I do a lot of business speaking, a lot of communication, especially with things like Corey and the butterflies, although there is an iPod in the story. But sometimes you get stuck with that moniker and then you can't get rid of it. So for example, I remember doing a presentation at the Business Link in Edmonton, and that's a business incubator. It's a center for entrepreneurs to help grow their businesses. That's a phenomenal place, by the way, pure plug for Business Link. I was doing a presentation on promotional strategies for small business, and it was actually a 3-hour workshop. And what happened was at the end, someone came up to me and they gave really negative feedback because they were expecting it to be a lot more technology related. There was technology in there. But when you're talking about promoting businesses, not everything is done online, especially if you go back maybe 10 years ago, less and less was done online. And I don't even think Uber was around. I don't think Skip the Dishes was around. But the point is that I was trying to share strategies to help people grow their businesses. So case in point, there was a nutritionist. They go, well, how do you promote being a nutritionist? And one of the things that the nutritionist said, well, you promote the Canada's Food Guide. Right. But what about creating recipes? Right. What about having a workshop where people can come in and prepare dishes, or, showing them how to eat healthy, et cetera, et cetera. And it goes on and on and on. Those things are not necessarily related to technology. So there were a number of things in my presentation that had no technology in it at all. And so that individual felt that, you're the gadget guy. I was expecting a lot more technology in there. The other thing sometimes is people are unrealistic. I remember doing a marketing session. It was promotional. It was a PR session on how to do PR to work with the media, because I've seen both sides of it, right? I've promoted to the media, but I'm also a media individual where people are always pitching me on products. It's not always technology related. There's a lot of things that you can do. And I was surprised, for example, as to how few people in that room that day. There were 43 people in the room, and there were about a couple of hundred by video conference around the province. When I asked who here is familiar with a press release, I think 3 or 4 people put up their hand. And a press release is still commonly used to be able to promote your products and services to the media. So I got stuck with that moniker, and I thought, so there are times where I try to downplay it. I'm debating whether I should, formally be known as the gadget guy, but you know what? It still sticks. I had someone come up to me at a Second Cup a few years back. It was a kid. He must have been 14 or 15. Comes up to me, says, "Hey, Dad, look, it's the gadget guy." So it's like, I don't know. It's and the same thing when you're trying to promote your business, or you're trying to promote your book or something. It's not always about the technology and the gadgets. And of course, as I get a little bit older, I find it is less sometimes about the technology. Yeah. I do have a Kindle, I do have an iPad, I do have a few others, but I still really like to sit down and in the morning have a cup of coffee, not a digital coffee, a real physical coffee, and read an actual physical book.
There's something about the feel of holding a book that's a little bit different than using it on a screen. So I personally still like holding the book.
I like the book, except it's handy to have an e-version of it, because if you're trying to search something, you go, what page was that on? 604, you can actually just do a quick search in the book and go, okay, that's where that was. Or if you need to remember, maybe there's a quote that you were looking for and you can't remember where in the book it was, it's pretty handy to be able to do a quick search, and there you have it. So
yeah, that's true. You're a person who has interviewed so many different people and so many successful people all over the world. What would you say is the one common factor that all of them have? And then also part two of that question is what's the main reason why most people don't succeed?
Okay, so in terms of the interview, you're talking about in terms of their success or?
Well, yeah, what do you find that a characteristic that all of them kind of have in common?
Okay. Well, one of the wonderful things about doing a podcast is that you have an opportunity to get people to, in their own voice, really share their stories. I mean, statistics are great and they're great if they're put into context, but getting people to be able to share their stories, and everybody, whether they think they do or not, they all have a story to share. And sometimes it's a matter of, well, there's a couple things here. First of all, sometimes for one type of person, I guess, they may feel they don't have a story. It's a matter of trying to pull the story out from them. They may not realize that an experience that they had as a child may have impacted them. They may realize that why they're selling their products, right? Someone, case in point, I managed a Beatles tribute band, as I mentioned earlier. They were called Rubber Soul. Chances are you won't find anything on the internet about them unless you go to archive.org and you research it there. But when I first started, I really knew nothing about managing a Beatles tribute band. I knew about running a business, but not a Beatles tribute band. I got some help from the Business Link. Believe it or not, they had, at the time, one of their librarians was a drummer and he was a former musician. So I got some help there. I'm trying to remember where I was going with this. You know what? I can't remember where I was going with this. I know what I was going to say. I knew nothing about it. And then I realized, oh yeah, I know where I was going with this. Sorry. I knew nothing about it, but yet we were moderately successful initially because people came up to me and said, you really love this. You know, you're really, really passionate about this. Because I saw with the Beatles music, the impact that they had on individuals. You'd have parents with their younger kids, sometimes not necessarily communicating well. I had one lady share that with me, that her and her daughter didn't always see eye to eye, but yet they were dancing to the Beatles music and they loved it. So he said, and I was trying to sell this one show to this group. And one of the reasons he decided that he was going to go with us was because he felt the passion that I had, and I didn't even realize that at the time. So it's a matter of sometimes pulling the story. And with podcasting, or when I'm interviewing someone with a podcast, that's where I try to pull the stories from an individual. Everybody has a story, and some of them are gut wrenching, and sometimes you need to ask the people whether or not they want to share that story. I had an individual who shared with me where life he was having such a challenge in his life that he had actually thought about taking his life. And the thing about that is, someone might say to you, well, why do you want to ask those kind of questions? Because people are going to feel bad about it. But when you ask them, and if you put it in the context, and this is actually what this gentleman shared with me, and so these are more his words than mine. He said, if you look at it as a learning opportunity, or if you look at it as being able to help someone rather than just getting them to share their gut wrench story, when they hear it from that perspective. So, if you can hear someone to help them not be in that situation, then they'll be a lot more inclined to tell that story. And sometimes you got to pull the story, you got to really pull the story out. So if it was one characteristic, is that regardless as to who they are, doesn't matter what they do or how old they are or whether they're a public speaker or not, everybody has a story that they can share that can help probably make a difference to another person, maybe in different ways, but in a different person. Now, the second half of that question was?
Is that what do you believe that the biggest reason why most people don't succeed?
Okay, well, I mean, I have to admit, I haven't succeeded at everything that I've done. I mean, I've made a lot of mistakes, but I think a couple of the reasons that they may not succeed is, number one, they just don't try. They get it into their heads that, no, I can't do this, so that they just don't try at all. What is it? Wayne Gretzky said, you won't score on 100% of the shots you don't take. If you don't take that challenge, if you don't take that risk, then chances are that you're not going to succeed. Sometimes people won't succeed because someone tells them that they can't do it. I was working in a financial institution when I decided to go into my own business. And when I told people I was going to start my own business, they said, are you crazy? You got a really good job, you got a really good benefits, and we had a good bonus program. And I was pretty good at what I did, and I got a really good bonus, but I just decided that I just didn't have the passion.
Mhm.
And then finally people feel that, oh, it's already been done before, so they don't even try. And again, it might be cliche in using Apple as an example, but if you think about it, when the first iPhone came out, it wasn't the best iPhone out there. It didn't have the best specs, and even now, it doesn't necessarily have the best specs. I was reviewing a TCL Android phone that has a 48 times zoom on, or 48 megapixel camera. Even the new iPhones don't have that.
Mhm.
So they're not always the best in the category, but yet people were willing to line up for 3 days. And even though that part is history, the Apple store nearby, there's still people that traditionally, just for the tradition, will line up to get they'll wait in line to get their product. So they feel that it's already, you've been there, done that, without really doing research or without really flushing things through. Sometimes the first thing that comes to mind, you often hear that the first answer is usually the best answer, but it's not always the case. The whole idea is you want to evaluate the different alternatives and at least give it a try. With podcasting, people say, oh, no, I can't do a podcast. I'm not really good. Well, try it. Just take your phone, record something. You don't have to release it to the world, but just give it a shot. Listen back.
Yeah.
Give it a try. I know those are very general, but it's sometimes those smallest things. And I think there's one other thing: communication skills.
Mhm.
Communication skills. I know I shared this with you offline, but if you will, I can share it with your
Oh, yeah,
audience.
sure.
Is when I had my computer shop, we had an opportunity one day to bid on a significant number of computers. We were invited to bid, and it was funny because we helped this kid out on a Saturday afternoon. He walked in, had a trouble with his computer. Our technician had a quick look at it. It took 5 minutes. We just fixed it and we sent the guy on his way, no charge. So next thing we know, we're invited to bid on these computers, and our team, we put together this, nice proposal, beautifully bound, and off I went to the submissions office. We didn't do things by internet back then. And then when I dropped the envelope into the box, the secretary, the receptionist says, well, where are you going? She says, here, take your envelope. You need to present this to the panel. And I'm going, present? Panel? Panic. I looked around the room. I know everyone's smartly dressed. I wasn't wearing a Batman outfit, but I was just wearing a t-shirt. I was wearing a t-shirt and jeans, and I didn't have the confidence. So I took the envelope and I looked for a sign. And the first sign I saw was a nice big red exit sign. And I left and I never returned.
Wow.
And to this day, I don't know whether or not my bid would have been successful, or how many opportunities that I would have missed simply because I just didn't have the confidence. I mean, that was long before Toastmasters. And when I do my presentations, I use this as an example. It was devastating at the time. And now I look back and I laugh at it. And I liken it to Jerry Seinfeld when he said, people fear public speaking more than they fear death. Yeah. In fact, the guy doing the eulogy would rather be in the coffin, right? And yeah, I was just so fearful. And I remember going back to my car and I sat there for a while and I was just shaking, and it was pretty devastating. Of course, it wasn't until years later that I would discover Toastmasters that would change things for me. So that's it in a nutshell.
That's a great example, because there's a lot of people who go, hey, I do this type of work. I don't need to talk to anybody. I really don't need to go in and work on my communication skills. But
Yeah.
you really never know when an opportunity presents itself. You may not have the opportunity to go, let me think about it. Let me work on it. You might have to go right on the fly and start talking.
Yeah.
So that's a great example of that. And secondly, hey, I got an impression out of you, which normally I need to pull like teeth and nail from other people to do something different. But no, you jumped right into an impression. So thank you very much for that.
I have to admit, I've practiced that one a number of times, right? Only simply because I've used it a few times. And what's interesting is that you talk about doing impressions and doing presentations. Again, I'm always trying to improve the way I do things. When I first told the story, I just recounted, yeah, Jerry Seinfeld said this and he said that. And then you do the impression. In fact, when I tell the story that I told about walking away, one of the things I share is there's a book by Susan Jeffers called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. Are you familiar with that book?
I've heard of it, yes.
Right. So when I'm telling the story, I share that. And I said, you know that book? And I said, I hadn't read that book yet. So that's why I actually walked, I walked away from it. And like I said, it's, you still think about it. You still think about it. And you know what? I still get butterflies. I still get sort of a little anxiety every once in a while, but I try to make the butterflies work for me. And thus the title of the book. But I think it's human nature. You want to do a good job. And for me, like I said, I get forgetful on things. Like I said, I had to ask you to repeat the question. But the truth is, none of us are perfect. And I try to consider myself a lifelong learner. I'm always learning things.
Mhm.
I'm learning things from people who are much more significantly knowledgeable from me, but even people who are new to what they do, because sometimes they see something with how do I put this? Not a naive eye, but just something very, very simple. Like, for example, I had an individual who came up to me after a presentation and came up to me and said, Greg, you rock. And I said, thank you. And the guy looked at me and I thought he was saying, yeah, you rock. He says, no, did you notice that you rock back and forth when you're presenting? I thought, OMG, I never really thought of it that way. So that was actually kind of funny.
Different interpretations of different words, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
For somebody who's who talked about facing challenges and still having butterflies, what do you do to get your mind in the right space to overcome those challenges and overcome those butterflies?
Sometimes it's a bit of a challenge, because you might find yourself in a situation where you have a domino effect. You know the old story, you got a flat tire, you get up, you fall in the mud again. But I think that, and it might sound again cliche, but I find that quite often people right away, that when they have a problem or if they have a challenge that they're trying to overcome, the first thing they try to do is to try to solve the problem, as opposed to sitting back, maybe having a cup of coffee if they can. I mean, you can't always do that, because sometimes you have to do something on the fly because you're in the middle of a traffic or situation. But if you stop and you try to, again, evaluate a lot of the alternatives and see where you want to go with something, try to lay it out, get some help, get some advice, ask a lot of questions. I find that that's something that if you do that, then it'll help you a lot. When I wrote the book quite a while ago, it's kind of funny, it took me 2 days to write 80% and 6 months to finish it. But not having any children and not having a lot of younger people in my immediate family, at first I felt that I didn't have the qualifications to write about what I was writing about. But then I also realized that I was a kid once too. And in my younger years, in fact, when I do sometimes my intro, I'll say that, I got taken out from behind the keyboard onto audiences or onto stages. I was very quiet, shy, introverted individual when I was a lot younger. And again, not just walking away from a lucrative business opportunity, but I hid a lot in the background. I pretty much just wanted to be, just sort of a fly on the wall. But what I discovered is that if you ask questions. So what I did with the book is I went to individuals who had children. I talked to a few teachers. I try to find people who would be the recipients of it. So maybe their parents or even the kids. I even had some younger individuals sort of read over, and I said, does this make sense to you? I'm a firm believer that I don't look at a kid as a kid. I look at them as a young man or a young woman, and I look at them as our leaders of the future. And you want to make sure that you're talking to them. Like, you don't want to be talking down to them. You want to be talking to them. So I think that if you try to take time to look, basically stop and smell the roses, take time to think and ask questions. Taking time to think, sometimes you might find that it's impossible, right? If you've got 3 kids, they're going to soccer, they're going to dance, you're working 24/7, you're always on the phone, you're getting texts from your boss. Find the time that works for you. It might be at 2 o'clock in the morning, it might be 5 o'clock in the morning, or it might be a matter of, turning off your phone, going to the nearest coffee shop, although nowadays people are maybe keeping away from it, but go somewhere and just shut everything down and, do the analog thing. Grab yourself this little device here called a pen and just jot yourself down some notes. I'm doing that all the time. So those are some of the things that I would probably do to try to overcome some of my challenges. And does it always work? No, but for the most part it does, because I've always been one to, when something goes wrong, right, from IT, system goes down, people can't work, you try to go, oh, let's fix this problem right away. Again, sometimes the first answer is not necessarily the best answer.
Yeah, that's very, very true. You mentioned about asking questions, finding people who could actually support you and provide you the right motivation or the right path to go on. There's a lot of people who are afraid to go out there and ask for questions, or they don't find the value of having a mentor or having that person to support them because they believe they can do everything themselves. What do you say to them, and what do you say to those people who are too afraid to ask?
I guess if you're afraid, I guess the whole idea is that you look at yourself and say, you know, what's the worst that the person can, like, what's the worst that can happen? Somebody might laugh at you. Well, you know what? I got laughed at and picked on when I was a kid quite a bit. And then one day I just finally realized that if I don't ask the question, I'll never get the answer. Although sometimes if you see someone that you feel might need some help, maybe you're not necessarily providing a professional service, but if you see need some help, you know, let them know it's okay to talk. Just say, hey, you know what, you want to have a coffee or something and just have a little bit of a chat. When I was running my computer business, and again, it was very hectic, it was very chaotic. There's a lot of people coming and going. My accountant, who is actually a mentor, he was a vice president of a finance company. He was he was already kind of in the semi-retirement mode. And it's funny because I had a lot of trouble with paper at the time, and he saw that I had a lot of trouble with paper. And he tried to get me to organize myself a little bit better, but it just didn't work. So what he said to me was, he said, okay, he says, we're going to go for dinner on Wednesday. This is a Wednesday way back many years ago. We're going to go for dinner. Then what we're going to do is we're going to come back and you're going to clear your desk. And I'm going to sit there and I'm going to help you work through it. And then I'm going to get you to finish everything on that desk because your desk hasn't been cleaned in months, right? And he says, I'm going to charge you for the time. And
Ooh.
he did. And it's funny how he got me to the point where I'm still a little bit of a mess with paper. I think a lot of us are. But what he did is he saw how I worked and he came up with a system that worked best for me. And then every week, Thursday morning, I would pretty much shut my door to my office. I wasn't to be bothered. I wasn't to be disturbed. I wasn't to take any calls. I'm not sure if I had a cell phone. Oh, yes, I did have a cell phone back then. It was that big brick. And I would do some of my paperwork then and there. So, I mean, that was something that I learned. In terms of getting help, you know, ask for it. You may not think that you, again, sorry, I said before. So yeah, if you see something, someone, maybe approach them, but, or also ask them questions. And if you're not sure, maybe you want to ask yourself, what can I do to be better? Like, is everything okay right now? Is my time best spent? I mean, even now I find if there's something that needs to be done, I can't be in two places at once, even though you could do things virtually with multiple cameras. If I can find someone to help me with something that I can do, I look at the cost of doing it myself. So sometimes it's actually cheaper to pay someone to help you, or you may not have the expertise, in which case it's probably not a bad idea to see if you can find it. And if you're not sure where to go, just ask yourself, what problems do you solve? And either, do your search on the internet or ask someone. Do you know someone that can help you with something? Mentors are invaluable. And also mentors, again, one thing to mention is mentors are not necessarily someone that has a lot more experience. It could be someone that has a lot less experience. I've heard of executives in organizations where they're just not comfortable with this technology, right? So what do? They go out and find someone not to do it for them, but they find someone to help them learn how to do things for themselves.
I love that story because you kind of showed me a way how a mentor can go and charge and sit there and enjoy themselves.
That was funny. I said, I'm not paying you. He says, yes, you are. And it was funny because after the fact, he said to me, he said, I wasn't doing it because he wanted to make money off of me. He wanted to show me the value. What he was trying to do is he's really trying to show the value of my time and the value of being organized. Now, am I perfectly organized? No. Why do you think I had that black thing behind me over there? Because I got a bookshelf full of stuff. But you know what? It's real. It's sometimes when you see movies, you see television shows, you see this beautiful clean desk where the guy is moving his coffee cup and he's moving his stapler and his post-it note thing. I mean, that's not real.
So now here's a loaded question. What does your desktop on your computer look like? Is it all filled up?
Oh
All
yeah, my desktop is full of stuff. And you know what? I've got two monitors. And here's the funny part is I'm sitting here with a MacBook Air 13-inch,
Mhm.
right? I've got an 18-inch monitor beside me, but just to my left, that would be your right, my left, I have a 21-inch iMac that I haven't turned on in God knows how long.
Wow. Now, I know you're a person who loves giving back and you work with the community, you work with a lot of volunteering groups and whatnot. Tell us more about the mindset of giving back, the mindset of helping out the community, and how important that is for a leader like yourself.
Okay. Well, in general, quite often, and it's one of the interesting things. One of the things I do right now, it's on hiatus because there's no live presentations. But I do leadership training for a company called Crestcom International, and in one of the modules, one of the sessions that we do, we talk about volunteering, not just for feeling good, but which is good. It's a good thing. It's good for the soul, but it also helps you gain experience. So for example, if you're trying to learn how to manage people or deal with conflict, well, you know what? You can become a soccer coach, right? Or you can volunteer with a community league, right? And help maybe if you want to do, be better at finances, learn how to be an accountant for them. So there's skills that you can learn that can help you with your business. For me, I guess it's just a question of, I guess I learned this from my parents of always being grateful, even grateful for the smallest things. I mean, I remember when I was younger, we were walking somewhere in a corridor, and there was a chair there, and the custodian was there, and he moved the chair out of the way. And my dad turned to him and he said, "Thank you for moving that chair," even though technically it might have been his job to do it at the time. When I looked at that, I went, "Wow, that's really interesting."
Mhm.
And one of the things that I learned from my parents was that not only to be grateful, but whatever you're going to do is do the best that you can. In terms of giving back for me, again, even when I was a student, I didn't have a lot of money. I know if someone was asking for a small donation, I may not have been able to give a lot, but I did give a little bit. For me right now, I spend a significant amount of my time with Toastmasters, and I have done so in the past. I mean, I've gained a lot from it. I've learned a lot from it, and I feel that it's really, really good for the soul. And you want to be able to make a difference in someone's life, as they have done for me. My accountant is still my accountant. He's still my friend. He's long since retired, but I'm still quasi one of my clients. We're always talking all the time. Um, the in terms of Toastmasters, for example, is I took on some leadership roles, and then you mentor people that mentored you when you had. Sorry, you were mentoring people because people had mentored you. You don't do it because of that, but you just feel compelled. And in fact, this week when I was supposed to be finishing off a deadline on an article, I was actually editing a podcast for Toastmasters. When I actually been I was supposed to be working on finalizing my deadline. But you know what? You just do it. I don't know. It's part.
Mhm.
I mean, it's at the end of the day. I mean, you could be. What was it? What was that movie with Orson Welles? Remember the movie with Orson Welles, Citizen Kane? You ever see that movie?
Yeah, yeah.
Where he accumulates all of this wealth over time. And at the end, he's got mountains and mountains and mountains and mountains of stuff. But yet at the end, as he's on his deathbed dying, and he goes, what does he say? He says, snowball? I can't remember the word. Geez, put me on the spot. Look what happens. Snowflake, snowball. I can't remember. I don't want to spoil it for anyone that hasn't seen the movie, but at the end of the day, it's just, it's just stuff. I don't know. I'm all over the place on this, but
Hey, it's all good. No, I get
yeah,
it.
I know, I
I get
know.
it. It's good. For, so for today, what drives you today? What drives you to wake up? What drives you to impact? What drives you to work?
What drives me to work?
Besides the
Probably,
literal meaning of driving, but what drives you to wake up in the morning and go out there and change and help people?
I don't know. Sometimes I feel my brain doesn't seem to turn off. Unfortunately, I have my little Fitbit, which tells me I didn't get enough sleep. I typically wake up at 4:30 in the morning, and just I don't get out of bed at that hour, but my brain is just going as to what I can do next. I think the fact that I guess a job, if you want to call it a job, it's really never done. Okay. So for example, with the podcast, I keep thinking about, okay, who am I going to podcast today? What kind of stories can I be able to share? What kind of lessons that I'm learned? the possibilities are just absolutely endless. Even this morning, as I was thinking, I again woke up about 4:30, got out of bed about 6, had some coffee, prepared a little bit, and I was thinking about, what kind of stories are we going to share? What kind of questions are you going to ask me? What kind of stories are we going to share today? I think it's the fact that the story never ends. I think that for me is something that just keeps me moving all the time. And what difference can be made?
Cool. You have an opportunity to give one message to the world. What is that one message you want to share with everybody?
Oh God, that's a good question. What's your message? Uh, well, I'm not sure if it wouldn't be fair just to requote Steve Jobs, but I think, use your mind, but follow your heart. If you look at what's going on in the world today, a lot of the small things don't matter. Someone cuts you off in traffic, or you end up, something becomes, you break your glasses or something happens. You ask yourself, is this really going to matter in 6 months, a year, 5 years from now? And I think I'm thinking of that, a lot more. And of course, as you age, you get more aches and pains, and you see people are losing their families and their loved ones, whether it's related to the current crisis or not. I mean, at the end of the day, none of that other stuff matters if you don't actually have your health. So I think keep things into perspective. A lot of us are going through challenges right now. Some of us are going through more difficult challenges than others, but try to look at it as at a light under the tunnel, and ask yourself, is there something that you could do a little bit differently today that can help make a difference in your life or in someone else's life?
Great. Very, very good, strong words there. First of all, thank you very much for your time and your stories here. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to put up Batman for my wallpaper.
Oh, I love it. I need a screenshot.
I rarely get to do that, so thank you very much for that. What's the best way to get a hold of your book, or get to listen to your podcast?
Well, if you go to gadgetguy.ca or gadgetgreg.com, you can have links to everything. The book link is outsmartingthebutterflies.com. You can get a paper version on Amazon. You could also get the ebook at Smashwords. I'm just in the process right now of doing an update again. I'm primarily, the story isn't changing, just adding a little more FAQ, because what we're finding is that this is also being used as a learning tool right now. And the podcasts, toastcaster.com. It's like Toastmaster, but with a C. And also the Toastmasters, is it? The Toastmasterspodcast.com. Just Google my name. Unfortunately, you'll find me everywhere. Podcasts are available on Apple Podcast and Google Podcast as well. And of course, a lot of the other platforms as well.
I find that pretty funny. Lots of people go, you Google my name, you can't find me anywhere. And you're like, unfortunately, once you put my name in, it's everywhere.
Well, you're victim of a lot of spam, right? Someone sees a really cool article that I wrote. They go, "Oh, can you pitch my product, or can you do this, and can you do that?" And I get a lot of requests for to be on the podcast. And if you are interested, certainly drop me a line or connect with me. But one of the things I want to ask you is what message do you want to share? If you have a product to pitch, that is fine, but I don't really want it to be a sales pitch. Are there communication lessons that people can learn from it? Are there leadership lessons that people can learn from it? Is there a takeaway that people can walk away with? If there is, by all means. If not, talk to me, and I'm sure there's something that we could probably figure out.
Great. Thank you for that. Now, before I let you go, I do have 5 quick questions. Give me the first answer that comes to mind.
Okay.
Right? Batman or 007 James Bond gadgets?
Okay. Sorry. 007.
Ooh, that was an unexpected turn. If you have the chance to invent anything and price and budget's no issue, what would that item be, and what would it solve?
Well, that's a good question. Thing that I could probably invent, probably a real transporter to be able to, Scotty beam me up, but actually really happen and make sure that the molecules accumulate at the other end.
Now, who would you want to work together with on that invention? And it could be anybody.
Thomas Edison.
Oh. Now you have Mr. Thomas Edison in your kitchen right now, and he's hungry. So what's the Great Gazin's specialty? What do you prepare for him?
Okay, you lost me. I'm not sure what you mean by that. In the kitchen?
What meal do you prepare for him? He's hungry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking food. I'm going, okay, let's see. What would I probably pancakes.
Oh,
He loves pancakes. Yeah. Chocolate pumpkin spice pancakes. How's that?
Wow. You already have like special ingredients too. Cool.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
If you were stuck in your car and your car has one song that's stuck that plays over and over and over again, what's that one song that you're okay listening to for the rest of your life?
I'm not going to say it. Why? Because if I do, it's going to be stuck in my head for the rest of the day. How's that?
Okay, I'll give you a pass on that. And my last question is, what is success like? But before you answer that question, I have 4 cards here. Give me a number between 1 to 4.
2.
1, 2?
Yeah.
So how is success like a bouquet?
How is success like a bouquet? Okay. Well, success is like a bouquet. If you think about a bouquet of flowers, is that it can be arranged in many different ways, right? You can have certain colors in the front, certain colors in the back. You can put them in the vase. You can put them in a canister of some sort. So success doesn't necessarily mean the same thing to everyone. So my recommendation for everyone is don't define your success by the success of others. Figure out what success means to you, and whether you achieve it or not, that's what you want to strive for.
Awesome. Very well said. Thank you very much for that. So that is it for our interview here. Thank you very much for your time. Your stories were amazing. I loved your advice and your recommendations. And yeah, so again, for everybody out there, he's Greg Gazin. If you could pick up his book, it's awesome. Listen to his podcast. It's a lot of fun to listen to as well. And anything else you want to share?
I just want to say that it was an honor and a pleasure, and I really appreciate what you're doing. And again, just for everyone out there, Fong is doing this because he really wants to give back to the community, and he's trying to help make a difference in other people's lives. And thank you very much for number one, putting me on the spot, because I always really love a challenge, but it's also helping me. It's helped reminded me of some of the stories and some of the things that I've actually forgotten about, but yet are still important.
Awesome. Well,
Thank you so much.
Thank you again so much. He is Greg Gazin. My name is Fong. And until next time, today is the day to unlock your peak potential. We'll see you later.